So now we are going to have our third lecture today. So the following lecture is going to be given by Dr. Christiaan Alting von Geusau. And the title of his conference is The Ecology of the Human Being, Listening to the Language of Nature in Modernity. Christiaan Alting holds a degree in law from the University of Leiden in the Netherlands. He also performed some short stays abroad, mostly in university of the United States of America. Later on, he got a doctorate in philosophy of law at the University of Vienna in Austria. The title of his dissertation, his PhD dissertation, was Human Dignity and the Law in the Post-War Europe, which was actually published internationally in 2013. After practicing civil and European law in Amsterdam and Brussels until 2004, he is now the president and rector of the Katholische Hochschule in Österreich, where he also serves as professor of philosophy of law and education. He holds an honorary professorship at the University of San Ignacio de Loyola in Lima, Peru, and he is founding president of the International Catholic Legislators Network. In this latter function, he mentors political leaders from around the world and leads international educational programs for legislators. Christiaan Alting publishes and lectures on matters of law, education, public policy, and freedom of religion. So we are very happy to have you here today. We are grateful for your presence. You can start your lectures. You have 25 minutes for it.
Thank you very much. Y muchas gracias para recibirme en esta universidad. It is my first time in Ávila, and I'm very happy to be in the city. And as I was looking once again at the logo of the conference, I was again happy to see how well that fits with the theme that I will be discussing with you today, the ecology of the human being, listening to the language of nature in modernity. And I would like to start with a brief illustration of what this title actually means. Have you ever paid close attention to how God speaks to humans in the texts of Holy Scripture? In the Old Testament, he does not reveal himself in person, but he speaks to us through the realities of nature. For example, to Moses through a cloud and falling food. In fact, probably Moses was the first one to experience fast food because it was falling from heaven. To Elijah, he presented himself through the whisper, the gentle whisper of a breeze. To Jonah, through the sea and the whale and the beach where he ended up. To Elizabeth, now we're in the New Testament, through her child that leaped in her womb when she saw Mary. And to all mankind through a child born of a simple maiden and revealing himself first by turning water into wine and healing the sick and other wonders of nature. So whether a person is religious or not, we can all understand the point of these stories, namely that nature is a tangible reality and not, as many contemporaries claim, merely a scientific opinion or a social construct. So nature is a tangible reality that we can observe and understand and that speaks for itself. Hence, God, the creator of this nature, uses nature to speak to us. So the reality of nature has an order to it, a structure, a meaning, and a logic. And we can see this so powerfully expressed in human nature. For example, in the way human life comes into existence. I am myself a husband and a father of 5, so I know something about how human life comes to existence. So let's have a quick look at how nature goes in a structured, orderly manner about the creation of life. There is the embrace between the couple. There is the unification through the intimacy. There is the conception, which is the origin of life. And then the most important part, something that we men can only, look at with awe, and that is the womb, the place that nature has devised for the child to be growing in safety during 9 months. It's meant to be the safest place on earth. Then, the moment when these 9 months are over, nature has provided that the child comes out of the womb and starts the process of being taken up in a family where a father and a mother and the siblings, as it was meant to be, are then helping that child with the next step, and that is the growth to independence and adulthood. And then the circle starts again. So there's a logic to it. Each of these phases expresses a language, a manual of nature. When this is respected, then it yields a life that grows and flourishes. Now, you might ask yourself, why am I saying this here at this conference on this topic? Because when we want to speak about humanism and ecological transition, we have to start at the root and center of it all. What is the heart and the summit of the created order? The human being. If we don't learn to understand and respect the language of being of that human person, we will never be able to deal in the right way with the created order around us, whether the environment, the climate, or the universe as a whole. Now, since man has been given dominion over the earth, it can only exert that dominion in the right way and not fall into the abuse of it that we see so much around us, when it first acknowledges and respects its own nature as a human being. Therefore, speaking about ecology should always start with the nature of the human being and its relationship to the natural order around it. So, let's look in 3 stages at the ecology and humanity. The first part I would like to speak about is, what is the ecology of the human being? What does it mean? What does it stand for? In his 2015 encyclical letter that was already discussed today, Laudato Si', Pope Francis answers this question as follows. He says, Saint Francis of Assisi helps us to see that an integral ecology calls for openness to categories which transcend the language of mathematics and biology and take us to the heart, and here comes the most important part, of what it is to be human. So to take us to the heart of what it is to be human. He says this in Laudato Si'. So what does Pope Francis try to say with it? When we look at ecology and at the environmental problems and at the taking care of the planet, we should not focus on the science alone, the mathematics and the biology, for example, that he speaks of. But he's telling us we should look at the heart of what it is to be human. To be human means to live in harmony with all realities of the created order, not just those of our choosing, starting with our own body, mind, and soul. That will then allow us to see and act in accordance with the rest of nature around us. Now, let me put this in very simplistic terms just to make the point here. How can I expect to be able to comment on how one should drive and behave on highways if I do not first know myself how to drive and how to properly behave on a highway and how to maintain my automobile? The ecology of the human being is the unchangeable, created reality of human life that is governed by laws of nature that are not of our own making, but need to be respected and followed if we want this human life to function. As is the case with the rest of nature around us, animal populations die when their habitat is polluted or overrun by humans. Water sources dry up when we overuse them. In nature, all actions have consequences. Not only, again, in the environment where we speak about, but starting also how we deal with our own human nature. In his brilliant speech before the German Parliament in September 2011, Pope Benedict XVI observes as follows. He says, "We must listen to the language of nature, and we must act accordingly. There is also an ecology of man. Man too has a nature that he must respect and that he cannot manipulate at will. Man is not merely self-creating freedom. Man does not create himself. He is intellect and will, but he is also nature, and his will is rightly ordered if he respects this nature, listens to it, and accepts himself for who he is, as one who did not create himself. In this way, and in no other, true human freedom can be fulfilled." Now listen to these words. The highlight is here. He listens, he or she listens to it, to this language of nature, and accepts himself for who he is. Something that modernity finds very difficult to accept, and which modernity usually answers with violence, violently wanting to change our nature. But Benedict says, no, we first have to learn to respect and accept who we are, how we were created. The ecology of the human being is thus best understood as his or her nature as a given fact and accessible, understandable through reason that allows us to see. This is often what we forget when we speak about reason. It's not only something of the mind, it allows us, the use of reason allows us to see reality. The reality being, in biological terms, that I am a man or a woman, that I can think and speak, that I need food and sleep, but also community and solitude. So far, what is human ecology? The next question I would like to look at with you is, why is it important? If we ignore or violate the ecology of the human being that I have just briefly try to explain to you, not only is that human being itself coming to harm, but it will also cause destruction around. How do we expect a humanity that finds it normal, even claiming it as a human right, to tear apart and kill with poison a child in the mother's womb, to be able to take good care of the planet? How is that dichotomy possible? If we claim it is progress to make the life or death of a vulnerable person a matter of personal choice, how do we expect to learn to respect the unchangeable laws of nature and the fine balance of the ecosystem? Chaos breeds chaos, and our relationship with the planet will never be balanced when we reject the laws of human nature for which the planet was created. We are not alive to save the planet, but the planet was given to us to live on, and thus, as a result, for that reason, we need to tend it with care and love for us and for the generations to come. But a humanity that willingly destroys human life itself also unavoidably always destroys its surroundings. Again, the words of Pope Benedict XVI in the German parliament are clear. He says, "Man can destroy the world. He can manipulate himself. He can, so to speak, make human beings, and he can deny them their humanity." Human ecology is so vital because without it, we will never be able to deal effectively with the enormous challenges posed by the deteriorating environment and the realities of natural disasters, climate, and all the concerns we have. Since, as Pope Francis stresses in Laudato Si, everything is related. This is what he says. Everything is interrelated. Since everything is interrelated, concern for the protection of nature is also incompatible with the justification of abortion. How can we genuinely teach the importance of concern for other vulnerable beings, however troublesome or inconvenient they may be, if we fail to protect a human embryo, even when its presence is uncomfortable and creates difficulties? Those are the words of Pope Francis in Laudato Si. If personal, he goes on to say, if personal and social sensitivity towards the acceptance of the new life is lost, then other forms of acceptance that are valuable for society also wither away. So with this, Pope Francis tries to say, if we cannot even accept the most vulnerable of human life, how can we have sensitivity for the other issues like the environment around us and all the huge problems that are facing us there? Francis has a name for this. He calls this very often the throwaway culture. And that's not only throwing away plastic or throwing away goods that we have used, but he also often refers it in the way we throw away life. Human ecology and respecting it is important because it opens our eyes to seeing reality for what it is. And it allows us to embrace that reality instead of forcibly adapting it to our wills and whims or rejecting it altogether. Let me move to my third question here. How can we make this human ecology better understood? I would like to revert back here once more to the historical speech of Benedict in the German Parliament in 2011. By the way, I all really advise you to read that text. It's one of the most important texts any pope has ever written in the history of the papacies. It's not a very long text, but it is really one of those great texts of humanity. This is the reason why I quote it so often. He says, unlike the other great religions, Christianity has never proposed a revealed law to the state and to society. That is to say, a juridical order derived from revelation. Instead, it has pointed to nature and reason as the true sources of law. Remember this. Instead, other than all other religions, doesn't impose a revealed order. It instead has always tirelessly pointed to nature and reason as the true sources of law and the foundations of society. So if we want the ecology of the human being to be better understood, and therefore also be able to formulate better answers to our environmental and ecological issues in a humane way. And let me make a side note here. Why do I stress in a humane way? Because there are many proposals for dealing, for example, with climate change that are not humane. There's often been talk about climate lockdowns. Those are not humane, as much as COVID lockdowns were also not humane. So if we really want to better understand that, then we need to once again focus our educational endeavors not on the latest ideological orthodoxies, and you can name them, but on opening our minds and hearts and those of the young for nature, as in the created order of which they are part and that they found around them, and reason as the instrument given to us to understand that nature and the realities it creates. So if we really want to find this balance, this answer to those huge challenges facing us, we have to focus in education on the right thing and allowing the young and those to be educated to have access again to nature and reason instead of the latest fashions or feelings or whatever it is, but the reality of nature and the proper use of reason. This will then lead to recognizing the inviolable dignity of every single human being, allowing us to then fully see why and how we have to protect the natural environment in which each and every human being finds itself. Only this is the right sort of humanism that allows for a just and peaceful ecological transition. You see, I always like to say, I do not need any activists to tell me that I have to take care of the environment. It's a moral imperative, because I'm a human being who has been given the privilege of having dominion over the earth and who has the responsibility to take good care of it and pass it on to the next generation out of love, first of all, for that next generation. That's enough. That's a moral imperative every person should have. Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, in his encyclical letter Evangelium Vitae that he wrote in 1995, underlines this as follows. He says, "The Creator has entrusted man's life to his responsible concern not to make arbitrary use of it, but to preserve it with wisdom and to care for it with loving fidelity. It's all there. It's all there how we have to treat our human lives and the natural environment we live in with responsible concern, no arbitrary use, preserving it with wisdom and to care for it with loving fidelity. That's it. It's all written in those few lines. And later he says, the theory of human rights is based precisely on the affirmation that the human person, unlike animals and things, cannot be subjected to domination by others. We therefore need to return to an education focused on understanding nature and reason, or better to say, understanding nature through the use of reason and teaching young how to use reason. This will lead to a rediscovery of human dignity, which in turn allows us to treat our neighbors as ourselves, with the respect that will then also lead us to, in community, care for our habitat, the planet on which we live as a human family and where we have been given the responsibility to pass it on to the next generation. I come to my conclusion. Modernity will finally need to overcome its misplaced preference for positivism and technocracy, holding on to the dangerous illusion that all is self-made and in our power, and that all is in our power of will and science, whilst rejecting all the rest. Yes, our human will does play an important role. And yes, science is vital, but it's not everything. Let's see what Ratzinger has to say about that. He says, where positivist reason considers itself the only sufficient culture and banishes all other cultural realities to the status of subcultures, it diminishes man. Indeed, it threatens its humanity. We have a choice to make. Either it is dehumanization and further ecological destruction through rejecting nature and reason in favor of our own exclusive will, or rehumanization by embracing the order of the whole of creation, leading to human flourishment and transition to ecological balance. I would like to conclude, because it's one of my favorite texts in Scripture, I would like to conclude with a part of Psalm 8, because it describes in such an excellent way what I've just been trying to explain to you. It says, "When I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars that you set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him? And a son of man that you care for him? Yet you have made him little less than a god, crowned him with glory and honor. You have given him rule over the works of your hands, put all things at his feet." There are three key words in this psalm: dignity, authority, and responsibility. So this authority to rule over the earth requires above all one thing we have to do as humanity. In humility, listen to the language of nature, that is, all of nature. Then all will be well. Thank you.
asked to thank you, Dr. Alting, for your lecture. And now you are encouraged to ask questions or share your thoughts with us.
Muchas gracias, Dr. von Geusau, por esta preciosa intervención. Y no tengo preguntas porque me ha encantado su intervención y la perspectiva de la creación, que es la única que unifica la obra de Dios, la ley de Dios y la obra humana y las leyes humanas. Solo quería felicitarle y preguntarle realmente cómo es posible que el hombre pueda considerar en serio la opción de la deshumanización. Puede querer su propia voluntad al precio de destruirse también a sí mismo. ¿Cómo es posible?
I understood your question very well, but I will still answer it in English if you allow me. Your question is, of course, at the core of this issue. And that's why at the end I really highlighted education. Because in our modern society, we have lost this balance of, actually, Benedict XVI speaks about that in his speech before the German Parliament. We have lost this balance between what we ought to do and what we can do. And this is where, because humanity has made such enormous advances in technology, in medical science, in everything we do and everything we know, we have become as humanity arrogant. We have come to a point where we are starting to play God. And I would like to give you an example of that, of recent history, to make that point. I have been observing as a legal philosopher, really as a legal philosopher, I have been observing the response of our Western societies, European societies also, to the COVID crisis. And it's very telling, because many people are not seeing that yet. It's very telling how we responded, because we responded in panic. And why was the panic? That's my analysis, at least. Because we have lost this balance. What I mean to say is, humanity has made such enormous advances that we have come to a point that we think that we rule over life and death, which is also the reason why we are having such problems with the environment, because we don't know how to have dominion over the earth in a way that is respectful of the laws of nature. So what happened with COVID is we got so much into panic, because until that moment we thought we have control over life and death. Abortion, euthanasia, IVF, you just name all the interventions and everything we can do, and also the many positive developments in medicine. And then suddenly comes along a virus that we didn't know, that we don't know how to deal with, and we just get in total panic. And our reaction has been panic. Our reaction has not been a reaction of reason. We've just gotten into panic. And I find that very illustrating of that problem. And the only way we can go back there is, of course, it sounds so simple to say that, but it goes back to the core of education. Because the core of education is, what do we teach our children? Do we teach them to follow whatever feeling and preference they have? Or do we teach them how to think? Because that's what education originally was meant to be. The classical educational system was meant to teach people how to think and how to have the ability to also have a discourse about an issue. and to go about understanding reality for what it is and why it is so. But that allows, that requires from us to learn to have the patience, that's why I said, to embrace reality, and before wanting to forcefully change it according to my wishes and to more according to my feeling, let's first just pause and say, okay, why is it so? And this is something that our modern society can't deal with anymore. It immediately wants to grab it and say, it has to be changed to how I want it. So I know it's not a complete answer to your question, but it's certainly part of that need. And if we are capable of doing that, then we come to a point also, if I learn how to think, that also requires discipline, self-discipline. Yeah? And if I learn that, then I learn to, at the right time, see, wait, my actions, what I'm doing is becoming destructive. Stop, I have to turn around. And we have lost that sense because we have become so entitled as humanity that we can manipulate, as Benedict says, everything to our will, that we don't know the limits anymore.
Any other question?
Thank you very much, Dr. Christiaan. Well, in the same, also, I was really thinking, how can we deal with so powerful ideologies that deny nature, the gender ideology? If all the young people already now they don't know how to think, they just are very relativism, how do you say, relativists, and deny nature. So in my classes I teach social doctrine, and I try to teach this truth, but they're just so closed and saying that's your truth, and my parents all life told me that I can choose what I want to be, and I am not biologically what I am. I can choose by my gender identity. They're so already ideologized that it's really difficult to try to educate. Maybe it has to start in the families, but if families also don't teach this, what can we do? Because all the young people now are really mostly in this ideology that denies nature.
Mm-hmm. It's a very difficult question because, of course, it's something that needs to be dealt with on various levels. But first of all, it requires a lot of patience from us. I have, devoted my life to education. I have also founded a school where a secondary school where we are very much focusing on indeed going that way. And what my experience has been is that if we have the patience of engaging with these ideologies and do that repeatedly through sound arguments, through helping people, for example, to read good works, but most of all through the encounter. I love that word that Pope Francis always uses. He doesn't speak much about dialogue, he speaks much more about encounter. That is to say, getting to know the other person, getting to know the other person's perspective, and then patiently, not emotionally, but patiently through arguments and through reality, explaining what is going on. And ultimately, this one cardinal that I know well says this very well. He says, in the end, nature always wins. And that's the case with these ideologies too. Nature always wins. Nature has been built. The edifice of nature is built on the complementarity between male and female, whether it's in the animal kingdom or it's in human life. The whole of nature has been built on it. Nature will always win. what it requires is that we open the eyes of people to see that through reality. And it certainly doesn't help to polemize. Polemization certainly doesn't help. But all I can say is that it requires a lot of patience, a real lot of patience. And what I have seen, that if the sound arguments that are based in science, that are based in reality, are repeated often enough from different perspectives, people will come to see that. We should not I think one thing is important is that we should not too easily be distracted about the impression that is given that everybody thinks like that. That is not true. It's just that many people don't dare to express it. I know it's an incomplete answer, but it's part of the approach. I think, especially as Christians, we are called here to patience and love. I mean, doesn't it St. Paul says it in one of his writings? He says again and again, repeat it again and again, with patience, with love. Then we will win. Then they will see it eventually.
We are running out of time, so thank you very much for your questions, and we thank you for the very clear, understandable way you've given your lecture. So before leaving the room, I have to make a few announcements one for right now. So if you want to go on the visit to the city on the little train, it will depart at 7 p.m. from the main entrance of the building. So that's for right now, in 15 minutes. And then, as regards tomorrow, there will be a mass at 8:30 a.m. at the Monastery of the Encarnación. And then we'll start again with our lectures at 10 o'clock in the morning. So these are the three announcements I had to make. So, well, thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you very much for being here.